Hello and welcome to another episode of Adventures in .NET. I'm Sean Gleby, your host, and with me today, co-host, we got Christian Wins.
Hi everyone. As you notice, I'm remote today with kind of sucky Wi-Fi, but I'll do my best. Happy to have you on the show.
And we got Adam from Monic.
Hey Fox, nice to meet you again. Glad I'm here.
And we've got Mark Miller. He's doing double duty today. He's going to be your host and your guest.
I'm going to be asking myself my own questions. They're going to be hard hitting.
Maybe we should reverse that, so you are asking questions and we are giving you answers.
I'm going to hard hit everybody. Nobody's coming out of this podcast alive.
Uh-oh. I'll let my wife know. So, Mark, what have you been up to lately? What do you want to talk about?
Well, Sean, I've been working on voice to code inside Visual Studio. And I've been super excited by the last, I want to say about 6 months of development. And especially actually in the last 3 to 4 weeks of development. For about 5 months of it, I've had the feeling there's something here. And in the last 3 weeks, a number of elements of the design kind of converged and got to a point where I was like, oh, I got something I can release. I've got a feature that stands on its own. It's compelling enough that I think people will take a look, consider it as an alternative to typing in code. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about the process of development a little bit, I think. And I wanted to talk about, to try at least give you a sense of what it is as best you can over audio, an audio medium. And that's kind of it. Yeah. So basically the idea is voice to code. And from there, I open myself up to your questions.
So this is, you've been covering this on your Twitch stream, so that's what you've been working on for quite some time. So I've kind of got a little bit of taste of it. But this is more than just voice recognition, right?
Yeah, it's actually way more than voice recognition. It is voice recognition plus an engine that works with IntelliSense to find the best path to the code from what you've said. There's also, in some cases, a little bit of OpenAI involved, but in general, it's the hit out to OpenAPI is rare, and that really is happening not in the voice to code, but in other places, in other features like voice commands to infer intent. For example, we'll make a call to OpenAI if we can't figure it out with the engine. The advantages of essentially not trying to integrate OpenAI into this and instead just kind of creating an engine that finds the best path between what you've said, the ambiguity of what a spoken code might sound like. The advantage is that it's much faster experience. It's like an instantaneous experience almost. And I'll tell you, I've been looking at voice as an alternative input mechanism for over 20 years. I've been looking at it, right, studying it. And every time I've come back and said, no way, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. It's too inaccurate. It makes too many mistakes. Once it makes a mistake, correcting it is painful, right? It requires too much precision. Right, all of those were great reasons to look to other means of alternative ways of getting productivity. And that changed about a year ago with ChatGPT release when I realized, ChatGPT removes the need for precision. Right, I don't have to say something precisely if I want to, for example, invoke a command. Like if I had a command that was bound to the words build solution, and I said I'd like to compile all the files in my projects. I didn't use the word build or solution, but I can still make it enact that build across the entire solution using OpenAI. So OpenAI comes along and takes away the requirement to be precise. And so that was one of the pieces that came along and that helped out. The second piece that changed my perspective was that Azure's speech recognition services are fast and accurate. And that surprised me. Their accuracy surprised me. In my experience, it's easily like over 95% accurate with what I say, and the speed is essentially instantaneous. Because as soon as I start talking, my voice is going up to Azure, and as soon as I stop, it's already heard a lot of what I said. And so it's just putting the final touches on that, on the voice to text, and then it comes back. And so about a year ago, or 6 months to a year ago, these things kind of fell into place that made me reconsider voice. And then the piece that really kind of magically, well, I guess the first piece, I talked about this, I think, on a previous show when we talked about kind of what was in development. We were talking about voice commands. And I was talking about at that time, the killer voice command was open and then the name of the file. An open file was using essentially our own kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a fuzzy match or best match kind of algorithm, so that I could say a string of words and it could find the best file that matched and effectively instantaneously open it up. And when I say instantaneously, sub 200 milliseconds from the time I stop talking to the time the file is open. In general, that's right all the time, and it doesn't matter how big my solution is. That's where it gets really compelling, right? If my solution is 15,000 files, it still opens it just as quickly as if it were just a few files. So it's the fastest way to open a file. So that I'd made that breakthrough and talked about that. But similarly, after we made that breakthrough, I was like, I wonder, let's talk about, I wasn't going to release voice dictation yet, but let's explore it. And I started exploring it for strings and for comments. And within, a few lines of code, I get those working, and I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. And already for comments, it's great, because sometimes I'll do a to-do comment, and I want to get an idea out real quickly and get back to the code. And so I've got CodeRush. This is all part of CodeRush inside Visual Studio. So I hit /T, and it generates the to-do colon, and then I hold down the control key and I just start talking. And the control key, I haven't mentioned this till now, but the control key is like your microphone on button. So if you hold the control key and you start talking, it starts listening. So I get voice to comments and voice to strings. And then I'm like, well, what's the thing I do in strings all the time? Right? In interpolated strings, I'm holding down the shift key, I'm hitting the open brace, I'm then referencing some code. Because I want to put it in my string. I want to put that value in that C# string. So I'm like, all right, what if I held the Alt key down when I said the code? It's like, okay, cool. So I'm like, let's get the variables in scope. Let's see what those are. And see if we can get a match to them, the same way we're matching to the 15,000 files. Right? So we can very quickly find that with the closest match to what you say. And I get it. And I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. Now what if I wanted to say like A.B.C.D? Right? And that then begins the exploration of integrating IntelliSense into the whole picture. And we get to a point where we're like kind of what I would call borderline really beautiful in terms of functionality. In the past, I've written what I would call like I've created what I call breakthrough features that I was really excited about the first couple times I used them, and then I settled down and I got okay with it. In this case, with this feature, I generally get excited still every time it gets it right. right? I'm like, I say it and it gets what I want, and I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And that I've never done before. I've never had that experience where I am like essentially saying out loud, yes, right? Or look at that right there, right? I do it during the show. I'll stop. The feature is so productive. I get to spend like 5 minutes talking about pointing at the feature and looking at that and saying, wow, look at what it just did. So I guess in some ways it's so productive I'm actually slowing down because I'm talking about how great it is, how excited I am by it. But it's cool, right? It's cool. I guess we'll start by saying that. And I don't want to just keep talking, but that's kind of where we are. We're at this exciting point. And I think maybe the last thing I'll say, I said I was going to stop talking. The last thing I'll say is it's the shortest imaginable path between voice and code. So if you're sitting here thinking, wait, code is hard, code has got open parens and brackets and all kinds of things that are messy all over the place. How am I going to say those? And in general, the answer is you don't really have to say those things. You don't. You don't even have to say dot, right? You can say A, B, C, D, and if there's an A.B.C.D, it'll find it. And if there's an A.B.C.D, it'll find it. And if there's an A.B.C.D, it'll find it, right? So it is the shortest path. Now you can say dot if you want to disambiguate, if you've got some kind of, interesting namespace situations out there.
So just to give me some clarity, because I feel like I'm at a loss. So if I were to implement like a hello world application, right? So that would be using some public class, public static main, blah, 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 console write line. What do I need to say to get this source code? And will it actually work, or maybe I'm missing something?
No, it is not. So yeah, that's a great question, Adam. The first release of this is essentially focusing on the ability to create expressions, simple expressions. So anything that you would assign on the right side of an equal sign, for example, or pass in as a parameter, that sort of thing, including parameters to, say, for example, an attribute. So if I wanted to, for example, like on a test case, create a category attribute, I would first hit the open brackets. And that open bracket enables IntelliSense to see all the attributes. I'd need to do it anyway if I was going to type in an attribute. And then I say, for example, category, and maybe that's all I'll do. And it'll find category attribute out there. It'll see that category attribute has a parameter, and so it'll give me the open paren, close paren, and put the caret right in between. So all I have to do is hit the open bracket, hold down the control key, say category, and release, and it's typed in category, put the caret right between the two. It's a simple example like that.
So it seems like it's much more closer to those code templates that you have in Visual Studio or whatever you call them, that I can just type like for, tab, 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 and bang, I have this big piece of code. But instead of typing, I just say.
Yeah, it's like that. And again, I'm focusing on expressions and also naming variables, naming things like that too, right? So if you hit F2 to rename, if you've got that key bound to your rename inside Visual Studio, you can now hold down the control key, say the name that you want it to be, and you'll get a camel case or a Pascal case identifier based on what the current one was of what you just said. So you don't have to hold down the shift key and type it in. You just don't have to do anything. It's just there. That's another example of it. It has a general awareness of whether you're likely to be wanting a new identifier name, or you're trying to reference an existing type, or you're going to create your own type. It has a sense of context. That's not bad for a 1.0. It's not what I would call exhaustive and perfect, but it's really not bad for a 1.0 release. It can also do really intelligent things in terms of figuring out the path. It doesn't just approach one solution. It actually creates a tree of solutions. And in my debugging experiences with it, I've seen that where it's created over 100 different paths to try to figure out what's the best path. And I'll give you like a simple example. Let's say, for example, I have a list of points, right? A list of two-dimensional points, and that variable name is called list of points. If I want to find the one that's furthest left in there, I can say, like I can type in my return, and now I'm ready to do my expression. I can now say list of points, order by X, first or default, like that. That's all I say. So it finds list of points, finds order by, it finds the X property on the point, right? And it generates the lambda expression for you. Then it sees first or default. Well, first or default doesn't exist on X. So it backs up and looks at the order by and sees that it does have first or default there. And it generates that. So all your parens, all the lambda symbols, everything you need, all the syntax, semicolon. Well, the semicolon was already there when in my version. It doesn't have the semicolon yet on the end of the line if it's not there. But everything in the middle for the expression is generated.
So, question here, because now we have some concrete examples, so I'd like to grill you just a bit.
Grill.
How does it know you set order by X? How does
Yes.
it know that this X should go into the lambda and isn't part of like the function name? Like there was a function order by X.
Oh, well, it actually knows about both of those possibilities. If there's a function that's order by X, it finds that too. What it does is it's trying to find, it's assigning a score to each of these different paths. And the more words from what you say that it uses, the higher the score. The more things make sense, the higher the score as well. So you might, for example, say the names of 3 different variables without any operator between them. That doesn't really make sense. So I might say A, B, C if I had 3 different variables. That doesn't make sense. So that would get a lower if A had a property called B, and B, that whatever class that was, had a property named C. And then would do A dot B dot C, and that would win over listing 3 separate variables. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's like a greedy matching basically, and we want to capture as many things as possible, and this hits the highest score.
Yeah, it's super interesting. In fact, even this journey of trying to create this architecture in the background was filled with interesting things, challenges I've never had before as a .NET developer, and kind of creative solutions to them, right? One of the interesting challenges that didn't really have a creative solution was just this idea is I'm going through this tree, I'm having leaves on the tree that are actually being modified later on, and I'm realizing, oh, you know what? Immutability would be really good for debugging, right? And so I was like, okay, let's start cloning and branching these pieces off of here and not ever mutate. If I ever get to a point where I want to mutate, I instead, clone and keep going, or I prune the branch off. Maybe the old one I'm not needed anymore. The other thing I did is I created like a two-dimensional tree-like visual representation in the form of a string that's used only for debugging that basically says, hey, where am I? What branch am I in? Right? The other thing that, because it's also a recursive set of calls to evaluate, it became important to uniquely identify each branch so that if I'm inside a method at a breakpoint and I come in a second time and I'm in the method again, I can very quickly visually check the number, the ID of the branch that's passed in as a parameter to see, am I in the same one I was just in? Oh no, I'm on a different branch. I'm at branch 104. Let's wait, let's set a conditional breakpoint until I get back to branch 4 inside of this flow. So those kinds of things were interesting challenges in kind of getting here.
Were you figuring that all on your own, or maybe there are white papers talking about these things?
It's pretty much all on my own. So here's what happens, right? This is the other thing that's actually really exciting, right? When you start talking, sometimes the IntelliSense that we need is not even available. For example, if I'm in a comment or a string, there's no IntelliSense, right? But when I'm there, I should be able to reference, but I don't want to make you type in a curly brace just so that we can get IntelliSense, right? So what happens is, as the engine is evaluating, it's going in and checking with IntelliSense along the way. And it is sometimes even sending speculative code out and asking, what does this give me? For example, in the list of points, order by X, first or default. When I get to the point where I'm saying first or default, and I don't find it on X, I go backwards and I start looking at, well, what's X contained in? It's essentially an argument to order by. What's the type of order by? Okay, well, in order to get that, I got to go all the way back to list of points. I got to get it, and I got to write some speculative code that says list of points dot order by, and then lambda expression grabbing the X. And I go out and I get its type. Then I go grab its members, and I check to see what is first or default in there, and it is. And I say, great, got a match, and we keep going. Another example, if I said date time UTC now minus a variable called time, for example, time, total days. Total days does not exist on date time, but it does exist on the binary expression. So what does it do? It first starts the first part, and it says, nope, I don't see total days on there. Let's go back. Wait a second. I've got a binary expression. Let's try putting it in parens, or let's evaluate it and see if I find total days. And if I do, now let's put it in parens. So what's exciting about it is it only puts parens on there if needed. And you never have to say open paren or close paren or anything like that to get the code you need.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, go ahead.
But would something like if X smaller than 5, then call function Y work? Because I'm not saying the parentheses and there is no then in C#. Would it kind of wiggle its way into?
No, because we're
I don't know
not
how
doing.
useful that will be, right? That's the other question. But
Well, we're not doing statements yet. And part of the reason we're not doing that is because it's built into CodeRush, and there's already loads of shortcuts in CodeRush for very quickly getting everything. What's exciting to me about this feature is this is like the last component in productivity that CodeRush can't come up with names for you, based on what your intent, your thoughts are in your head in terms of what your intent is. But if you speak them, now it can get those. So the naming was always kind of one of the hard things to do. But you can get in there, and if you want to do an expression like, something like I said before, date time UTC now minus time dot total days is less than 5.3, you can say that. And you can get that inside the parens. Does that make sense? So if you have if you use either a Visual Studio snippet or a CodeRush template to get your if, or you just type that part by hand, you can get that inside piece. And in fact, that also brings me to another challenge, was speech to numbers. There was nothing built in to do that. And so we had to essentially write that from scratch as well. And we have support for numbers up to about a quintillion, the spoken numbers, which is probably bigger than most numbers people actually say out loud. Right? And you also...
what a real Google is.
Yeah, we don't go that high, in part because we're building this thing in the background, and I was like, you know what, quintillions, there's kind of a reasonable limit, right? There's a part of the reason why I'm saying we are releasing this with support for essentially building expressions in code, is that really complicated expressions are hard to hold in our heads anyway. We generally have to build those a bit at a time. The exception to this is fluent programming. Like if you are inside a unit test case, and you've got fluent assertions in there, you might be able to say something like assert that my parameter dot to string dot length is less than 5, or whatever you want to do. And that is easy to hold in your head, and you can say that and be able to generate and get that code.
Do you do any expression evaluation just when I'm saying? For instance, if I were to say integer x, I understand you put only the right side, right? But if I were to say integer x equals to 5 plus 7, would you put 12?
No.
Is this
No.
on your roadmap? Because I'm just looking for those fancy bugs when I say 0.1 plus 0.2 and you put something which is off by float errors.
No, I don't. Yeah, you're gonna have to look at all the code that's generated, Adam. You're gonna have to do that. Yeah, look, we're doing some pretty heavy lifting in the background here. You're gonna, we can't make everything perfect on the 1.0.
Gotcha. So I have a question around performance then, because
Yeah.
like the longer sentence I say, I imagine the more backtracks, parents inserting and other stuff you need to do. How fast is it, and how much load does it generate?
Yeah, it's in my test. It's essentially instantaneous every time. It is. It's just like you say it. You look, it's like I said, it's about 200 milliseconds to, maybe 300 milliseconds at the most. And you just say it, and then you look at the screen or look at the editor, and there it is. It's essentially what you've just said. Yeah.
And how correct do I need to be? What if I say sort by instead of order by? What do I get?
I don't know. Let me try. Let me see what's going to happen here. I'll switch over here. So I've got this
demos.
Live demo for it will describe what's happening for people listening on here. So I'm going to say list of points.
If you follow us on LinkedIn or we're streaming YouTube, Facebook, then you will actually be able to watch Mark doing his magic.
All right. So here we go. We're going to say list of points, sort by X, first or default. Yeah, so we get out to something different, right? We find apparently the sort method, then I said the word by, it found byte, and we couldn't get any further than that. Okay? But do it the right way though. Well, wait, let's try it slightly different though, okay? List of points ordering X first or default. Oh, we got some of it right there. Let me try it again. I paused a little bit too much. List of points ordering by X first or default. There you go.
Gotcha.
So it gets you. So if I say ordering by, it'll find order by right there.
Gotcha. So it accepts some like mistakes as long as it can kind of fuzzy match still the proper subject. Let's call it.
Yeah. That's essentially correct. It's trying to find the best path to what you said. Yeah.
So there in your example, it found that a point had an X property on it, so it did X.X. So would to clear that up, would you say variable X, order by variable X, or?
If you want to change this variable right here, the lambda variable?
I just wanted to be, if there was a variable name, well, there you've got a variable name called X, and it chose that rather than.
Yeah, it gives you for the lambda, it defaults to this X whatever, just because we've seen that a lot. This X is on point. So if I came in, if I wanted to find create a new method, get the topmost point, for example, we can come in here and change that to. Well, let's do this. I'll hit rename and say get topmost point, like that, and that's how fast it is, right? Yeah, Adam's smiling, kids. He's muted, but he's smiling. He's probably.
What if there was an X variable in that scope?
Oh, in this scope right here. So you want to do like an X like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm not sure do you still want the same line of code, I guess is the question? Or are you.
What's it going to pick if you say the same command there?
I think it'll be fine. I think that'll be that's in scope and that's got its own scope, I think, but maybe not. We'll see. It doesn't. I'll tell you, it doesn't come up with an intelligent alternative. It's a 1.0 release, Sean. But
but it's you, Mark.
Let's try it. List of points, order by Y, first or default. We'll do that right there. So yeah, I think we're good. I think this it sees in a different scope. Oh no, it doesn't. So we're not good. We have a problem. So we'd have to go rename or fix it. Is that true? If I rename that right there, it doesn't change it? No, I guess it does. It changes just this. So that's cool. All right.
So the plan is for this to be in an upcoming release of CodeRush?
Yeah, it's coming out on the 4th of May the 4th. Since,
Star Wars
since,
Day.
since I've got the demo up here, take a look at this right here. I'm inside a string right up here, and I'll say, this calculates the difference between name of time 1 and name of time 2, like this. And it builds
It
all
is
the-
clever.
all the pieces. If I'm inside, and I didn't talk about this, but check this out. If I'm inside an XML.comment and I do something similar and I say, this is a really cool method and it calculates the difference between time 1 and time 2, like that. And now it puts in param refs for the time 1 and the time 2.
So, question around generalization of this mechanism. Like, how many C# constructs you basically had to code into this mechanism, and how many of them you kind of get for free? Because, like, did you have to do something special for this name of to get it working?
Yes, actually I did. Name of is actually inside of what we call this expression map here. So there's name of right there, and it maps to the name of, and for folks who are just listening, what's happening here is I've got words on the left that I say, and they map to some code on the right. So, for example, I also have the word squared, and I have square root, and square root calls math.square root. So, as an example, I can come in and, as long as we've got the live demo up here, I can go in, get the distance between 2 points. So let's just build this from scratch. So I'll start, and I'll start with my expression. So I've got nothing in the method, and I've got 2 parameters that go in, 0.1 and 0.2. And the method's going to calculate the distance between the two. So I'm going to start, I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to say 0.2x minus 0.1x. And we get that right there. It looks like I'm not sure why I got the zeros in there. It looks like it's just a demo bug there. Once I'm there, I'm going to come in and I'm going to get to here. I'm going to hit a shortcut in CodeRush. It's going to declare a variable for me. I'm going to hold down the control key and say delta x. And then I'm going to duplicate this line. That's a CodeRush feature. Change the x to a y, like that. Then I'm going to hit the return key, the R key for returning things, and then I'm going to say square root of delta x squared plus delta y squared. And it calls math.square root, and it does delta x times delta x plus delta y times delta y. And that is brought to you by some of those settings that you saw in that file there, that allows you to say these words mean this thing. Because I didn't want, but you could also probably come along and say math square root. I think that might work too. I haven't tried that. Let's try it right now while we're here. Math square root delta x squared plus delta y squared. Looks like it still works. Oh, I got an extra math in there. So looks like that's a bug. I got to go get after that. But we're not released yet, kids. We're almost there. The other cool thing about this, by the way, kids, is I built a command into CodeRush that if you bind it to a shortcut, you can hit that command and it will copy the data needed for us to create a test case based on what did not work for you. So if you get, for example, if you found the issue that we just saw there with the extra math square root that just came in, all you have to do is contact support. They'll say, here's the command, bind it to a key. You press the key right after it fails, and then you're going to get a whole bunch of data and that in a text file on the clipboard. And you just send that to us. And the data includes all the words you said, what times you actually said. And by the way, the algorithm uses the distance between the end of one word and the beginning of the next as a way to fine-tune your intent. Because we put small pauses as we speak between things that are like parameters, like a list of comma-separated values, right? We put in, and also between dot delimiters, right? And so there's small little fine-tuning adjustments so that in the event we get multiple cases that work, we then break the tie using the spacing between the words.
So
Because you're going out, because you're going out to cognitive services, is it multilingual?
Oh, that's a great question. So right now, it's not really, the experience is great if you are a native speaker in the same language that your variables are declared in and your types are declared in. And since most types are declared, since most code is in English, if you're not a native English speaker, then depending on how different your accent is or how difficult your accent is, you may not have as great of an experience as if you were a native speaker, or if your variables were in the same language that you are a native speaker in. Does that make sense? So that you can definitely switch the language up and use another language, but you need to, since we're going to be speaking English for a lot of the code that you have here, it really is going to work better for you if you don't have a strong accent and you're saying the English words in a way that Azure Cognitive Services can detect them accurately.
Or maybe use translation services to translate into English and then feed it in.
Yeah, I don't know. That's outside the scope, Sean. This is why you're not sitting next to me, Sean, while I'm developing.
Well, I did one day, a couple days, maybe. But yeah, the first time I saw this, the first thing I thought of was how much this will help with accessibility for those with disabilities.
Yeah, I've got a few folks who are in that space that watch the show, that watch the development of this with interest. It's actually great. One of the guys that's watching has only ability to use one hand. And another guy can't use really either of his hands very well. And so these folks are watching, and so we're making sure that you can use this with only one hand. But there's another benefit to this that I love, and the benefit is that some things that used to weigh heavily from a perspective of cognitive load, like typing in a long detailed comment of what your to-do is, right? Or typing anything in and seeing you've made a mistake and going back and correcting it. It takes your mind away from the code, right? And it weighs down, and you do this enough, there's a limit to how much you can do of this kind of drudgery, these kind of correcting mistakes. There's a limit to how much you can do during the day. And one of the things I love about this feature is that I'm able to do things that normally take a lot of time to do, especially even like naming things, getting good names, right, for variables and things like that, right? Things that would take a long time to type in, and then I'd be like, okay, where was I? Get back on track again. I've named the variable. Those are all gone now. Now I just I need to get a string, or I need to get a comment, I need to get a good variable name in. I hold the control key down, I say it, and I am so undamaged by the experience, I feel refreshed. And that is a great benefit, because by being able to stay at a lighter cognitive load level while you work all day long, it allows you, I think, to explore and embrace more complexity in what you do, right? In the code itself, in the structure, in the architecture.
So how much work would you need to do in order to support different programming languages? Let's say VB.NET just to begin with, but let's go crazy and support COBOL.NET, because why not?
Yeah, I think, how much work? There's not a lot in terms of the internal engine that needs to change. Right now, we've focused only on C# because that's the majority of what we're doing in this release. And we're kind of flat out saying this is the 1.0 is that. But customer demand will influence where we go. So Coder still has strong support for Visual Basic. And if we get a lot of requests for it to go in that direction, then we'll likely do it, and that won't be hard. Going to a language that IntelliSense does not support is probably going to be a no for us, because there's so much value that you get from IntelliSense. We just could not get the feature to where it needed to be without IntelliSense, without being able to say, to asking Visual Studio, hey, here's some speculative code. What do you think? What do you call that? What would it be? Evaluate that type for me, that expression. Tell me what it is.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically, in those languages, you would need to re-implement IntelliSense first, and that would be a big picture on its own.
Yeah, that would be probably a deal breaker for us, right? But if IntelliSense was already available, we could do that. We definitely go in this space. Yeah, I like this space a lot that I'm at, because I'm still writing a lot of code, right? I'm still writing a lot of code. I'm not telling AI to go do the whole thing for me, right? I'm not going out and copying whole blocks of code. And even if I do, I'm still making changes, to that sort of thing, right? So this, and I love how fast this is compared to OpenAI. For me, OpenAI, if I make a call to OpenAI and I'm like watching it type it in, or I'm waiting for it to be done and then seeing the result, it's taking a long time and it kind of takes me out of my flow. And I really like how this is kind of keeps me in the flow.
Is this
What
going
are
to
the
require the
prerequisites
user to
then?
have an account with ChatGPT or any other services?
Yeah,
Same-
it's
same question,
yeah. No, great question. This requires two. Voice commands require OpenAI if you want to allow for inferred intent. So if you don't care about inferred intent and you're okay just saying it exactly every time, then you won't need OpenAI. You are definitely going to need Azure Cognitive Services API key, and these are things you in order to opt into the feature, you have to supply those keys yourself. And just as an FYI, in terms of cost, my speech bill is like pennies a day, and I'm using it all day long to code. So it's like for the month, it's about $2 or something like that in charges. Is what I'm getting. So it's really it's not really even a consideration from the standpoint of cost from my perspective.
And is the plan to integrate this with something like Copilot, so you could say, generate a method that does blah 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 with these parameters?
I'm definitely, it's on my list to look at that possible integration. I was originally, and I think I even talked about it on the show, I was originally building an agent to essentially be like Copilot, but it would be a essentially free agent, kind of in quotes, I'm putting that in air quotes, because you would still require a key. So you'd still have to pay somebody for your OpenAI, right? And I was building that, and I kind of liked the direction. There were some intelligent things that we were doing in that path. But now I'm thinking, what if instead I just said no, and we instead just made Copilot easier to use, right? Because our holding the control key down to talk is really good. It is really good. It's way better than saying, hey, Copilot, let me do this. Right? If you have to preface everything, that also means it's listening live all the time. It's always evaluating what you're saying, and it probably means it's evaluating locally, which is not as good as Azure Cognitive Services. Right? Maybe it's listening locally just for hey Copilot, and then it sends the rest of the sentence out to Azure, and then it boosts accuracy. That's probably how they do it. That's probably how I would do it.
Yeah, or
But-
hey Mark, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want to say anything extra, right? You can see I've even if I want to pass in parameters, there's a word I can say which is with, so I can say calculate the distance between 2 points with 0.1 and 0.2. I could say that, or I could just say calculate the distance between 2 points, 0.1, 0.2. And it figures out that, wait, I need 2 parameters. Let's go take those and put them in, the things I found, and stick them in there. So I don't want to say anything extra. So I sure as heck don't want to say, hey Copilot, or hey Siri, or hey Google, or hey anybody. I just want to push a button when I want to talk and release the button when I'm done.
Is this Windows only?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Windows only, Visual Studio only. So it's CodeRush for Visual Studio, but CodeRush is free, kids. So, nobody's making any money on this show.
Very cool, very cool. All right, so our listeners, check this out. Look for it on Star Wars Day.
Yeah, Star Wars Day from Dev Express. We'll put a link out there somewhere. CodeRush.
Cool. With that said, let's move on to picks.
Awesome.
Christian, why don't you go first in case you lose your connection?
Yes, so since I have a low-key connection, I wanted to have a low-key pick. I had this pick a couple of months ago, so you all know what's coming, right? But I have to do it again in a revamped edition. So early February, the beta version of jQuery 4 was released. I only noticed because I mentioned in release notes, one of my contributions from 2020 made it in that version. And they modernized the library, so they dropped support for IE 9 and 10, I believe. No, but seriously, still, if you look at the project, the number of open issues, which is I think 70, and then look at the number of open issues in any other significant framework, which is 4-digit, still great library for many, many use cases. And especially since many single page application frameworks these days reinvented something great, server-side rendering, the 1989 approach to web development. I still appreciate that you have a very approachable, intuitive API as an alternative for select projects. So jQuery's version 4 beta is my pick for this episode. Over to Adam, please.
So my pick for this week is gonna be around something some of us do every day. So we probably all know Remote Desktop, Microsoft Terminal Services Client, mstsc.exe. Now the question is, how do you do that mstsc.exe from your VR goggles? And the answer to that is called vSpatial. So I recommend this application. You get yourself a decent VR goggles. I'm not going to do any product branding, but I can say the version of those goggles is free. And you install vSpatial and get a Bluetooth keyboard. And the best of that is you don't need to have PCVR, not at all. This thing is just like RDP server with RDP client. It works in the browser as well. But generally, you can also install it on your VR goggles, and you put on your goggles, and you have 4, 5, 6, how many screens you need in front of you, all around you. You just take your Bluetooth keyboard with you, and you ditch the laptop. Works. Now get your eyes ready for that, because that's gonna be the next level of the living and working.
Looking forward to our next podcast recording when I just look left and right and see all of you in 4K.
Actually,
Awesome.
I think because this vSpatial is not only about RDP. This is generally like a whole product, whole platform that also supports like video conferencing and other stuff. And I think one of the features they have, I didn't test it, but one of the features they have is like you see your the people you're speaking with over the video conference like in a room. So it's already there. It's just everyone would need to be using vSpatial for that instead of Zoom or Microsoft Teams.
All right, Mark, what's your pick?
My pick is Poor Things, the movie. I recently saw it. It's up for an Academy Award. I've seen at least half of the films that are nominated. That's my pick so far. It's not a movie for kids. It's definitely for adults. But I was generally really impressed with the look. It's got some great performances in it as well. And the script was great. Really super original idea. I loved it. That's my pick.
Okay, so my pick this week is another Netflix show that I really enjoyed watching, and it's Gran Turismo. So, it's based on a real life story where they took the best players of the game and put them in real race cars, put them through, training and all that stuff, and found who is the best real life player that was in the game. And he is actually still racing today. So he became a professional race car driver, did well. And I found the movie really interesting. So check out Gran Turismo.
That's going to happen.
Alert.
That's going to happen to me one day. They're gonna see me coding so fast. They're gonna say, "Get him behind a race car right now."
All right. Thanks, everybody.
You have voice
Thanks, Mark.
control in the race car. Oh, sorry for that.
Turn left. I said turn left.
All right. If our listeners want to get in touch with us, they can reach out to me. I am on all the platforms. I am at .NET Superhero. So let us know what you want to have on the show. We'll try to do it. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch
Thanks,
you on
Sean.
the next episode of Adventures in .NET.
Till next time.